I think the NFC is stronger this year than the AFC is right now.
That they're not a wild card. They're a sure pick.
You are unstoppable.
To Unstoppable with me once again, Katie Majeski, Julian Gompertz, and apparently we've been lying to everyone because Julian is not unstoppable. Katie, rapid fire, 11-2, 6-0 last week. Julian, a dismal 6-7 overall.
They don't pay me to make the picks. That's all I'm gonna say. They don't
So
pay. Good TV. That's all I was told.
Well, we know that none of you back in back in your dorms are doing this, but maybe if you were out in Vegas, pay attention to Katie.
Thanks. A lot of pressure.
As you know, at the end of each round, I pick a winner. At the end of 5 rounds, we know who is unstoppable. We've still got the rapid fire round coming, even if Julian isn't so good at it. So stay tuned.
Work in progress, right?
It's rough.
Work in progress. It's already taking shots. We haven't started.
First up today, we've got who is more important to their team, LaDainian Tomlinson or Adrian Peterson?
You know, Max, I don't even think that this should be a question. Obviously, Adrian Peterson, much more valuable. The Vikings have no one besides Adrian Peterson. He is their entire offense, and I think if they want to have a shot at making the playoffs this year, if they want to prove that they're a playoff-capable team, Adrian Peterson is the only thing they got to get there.
The question that Max asked was who is more important to their team? And to me, when you ask that question, you're asking the question in the sense of if you have to replace that player, who fills in? LaDainian Tomlinson, for 5 seasons, the most dominant running back in the NFL. Behind him, Darren Sproles, nice running back, not a guy who can carry the load. Behind Adrian Peterson is a guy who 2 years ago, before they drafted Adrian Peterson, came in, rushed for 1,000 yards in Chester Taylor. So to me, it makes more sense. LaDainian Tomlinson is the most talented, not only rusher, probably the most talented receiving running back in the NFL. Picks up pass blocks well, makes Phillip Rivers better as a quarterback because he can pick up the pass block. And he is a vocal leader for that team. Without LaDainian Tomlinson, this team is as bad as they were now as they were 5 years ago.
But where is LaDainian Tomlinson this year? He hasn't done anything in the
He's
first
been
3
hurt.
weeks.
He's been hurt this season. That's the problem.
And what's happening with the Chargers is that I still don't think that
They're
they're a
0-2
terrible
is what's
team.
happened.
But I still don't think that they're a terrible team, and that they have enough people on their team that can play and that can back up. I think without Tomlinson, they can still be a legitimate team and have a legitimate shot at having a good record.
It hasn't shown so far. That's the problem. That's the problem. It hasn't shown. They're 0-2, and he's been hurt.
But here's the thing about the Vikings is that they literally have no one else. And that if you took Peterson,
Didn't he just tell you who else they had?
They have a 1,000-yard rusher sitting on the bench, not getting any carries because they have a running back as talented as Adrian Peterson.
But they don't even have a quarterback right now. Like,
No, they don't. But then again, in my mind, Phillip Rivers isn't much of a quarterback.
All they have is Adrian Peterson. You take Adrian Peterson away from the Vikings, and they become the Rams. They are no good without him. And right now, they're a team capable of making the playoffs. And just have one player make the difference between a team that has a losing record and a team
Adrian
making
Peterson.
the playoffs.
When you talk about Minnesota, you have to talk about the #1 ranked defense in the NFL. The Chargers this year, they're 0-2. They don't have Sean Merriman, so their defense isn't going to be anywhere near as good this year as they were last year. And LaDainian Tomlinson, without him, we've seen this. We've seen this now. Darren Sproles is a nice running back. He's quick. He's not going to be able to take 20, 25 carries a game. He's never been able to do it in his career. They lost Michael Turner. Without LaDainian Tomlinson, everyone around that team becomes less good. They're able to hone in on guys like Antonio Gates and Chris Chambers. And that's what happens because he's been so dominant for so long.
I disagree with you on Sproles too. I think that he is a good running back.
Small,
and
he's not proven.
And if you
He's a
check
kick
out the
returner.
stories about that team, almost every story that comes up is about how he's good, how he's stepped up, how he's going to bring that team up. And what are they saying? What are they saying about Tomlinson?
Nothing.
Nothing.
He's not a goal line
They're not
rusher.
saying
He's not a
anything
goal
about
line
him
rusher. He's
because
never
he's
going to
not
be.
that big. Because there's other people on that team that are going to be just as good that can step. I mean, okay, maybe not just as good. Tomlinson arguably is the best player in the NFL right now.
He set the
But it doesn't-
touchdown record 2 seasons ago. You
But
can't.
what's he doing
you
now?
can't replace
But what's he
28
doing
touchdowns.
2 seasons
we're
ago
out of-
doesn't
He's
mean
doing
out of
nothing
time.
and they're
season.
0-2. That's the point. He's doing nothing and they're 0-2.
We're out
That's
of
the
time.
problem.
We're out of time. I don't really think that the touchdown record from 2 seasons ago is a big deal because he hasn't gone over 20 touchdowns in any other season. But given that, there is a little guy named Chester Taylor behind Adrian Peterson who could probably do just as well in most of the situations. Maybe he doesn't quite have that explosion. So I am going to have to give the first round to Julian because there is no other LaDainian Tomlinson. So, Julian, you're up one.
At least not
you're
yet.
on your way.
At least not
Well,
yet.
not yet. So, as you know, between each round, we ask you a trivia question. We'll give you the answer at the end of the next round. And our first question is, who is the NFL's career leader in yards per rush attempt? Not currently in the NFL, but somebody to think about. That's my hint. Not currently playing in the NFL. So we'll come back with the answer to that right after this. We're talking about who is going to win in the NL playoffs, wild card, and NL East. Who gets there?
Well, if you look at me right now, I'm going to say the NL East with 7 games remaining. The Mets win the NL
Shocker,
East this season.
shocker,
And
shocker.
the Phillies win the wild card, and here's why. First things first, you look at the Mets' best hitters, David Wright, Carlos Delgado, Carlos Beltran, in the month of September, all hitting above 300. Those were all guys who slumped when you talk about last season versus this season. And then, of course, if nothing else, let's forget about the bullpen because we know how bad the Mets bullpen is.
So let's forget about the
We'll
worst
get
part.
back to the bullpen.
We'll get there, don't
We'll
worry,
get back to the
we'll
bullpen,
get
but their
there.
bullpen was atrocious last year. The difference between this year and last year, how about a guy named Johan Santana? If the Mets had hit for him in a couple more games, we might be talking about him last week for the NL Cy Young. Guy's been unreal. If. Guy's been unreal, has an ERA under 2.7. He's going to get 2 starts this week. The Mets have games against the Cubs and the Marlins, which might look bad on paper, but this is a Mets team that plays down to their opponents. If they were playing Washington and Atlanta, not the Cubs and the Marlins, I'd be scared. They're going to get teams like the Cubs and the Marlins, teams still fighting for the playoffs. The Cubs now in the playoffs, still a good caliber team. They'll play up to the Cubs. I think the Mets win the division. Philly's not used to playing from behind, playing from ahead.
Not used to playing from
ahead. Excuse me, not behind.
Are you kidding?
That's what we
not
do all
lived in
the time.
Philadelphia?
That's why they call them the fighting Phils. They're always behind. They fight
Exactly.
back. They're not used to holding a lead.
And now that we do have the lead, the Phils are going to keep that lead, and I think the Phils are going to take the division, and Mets are going to take the wild card. And let me tell you why. You brought up some offense. I think Phillies have typically been hot and cold on offense, but right now their offense is hot, and I think that they've only got a few games left, and they're going to stay hot through the end of the season.
Ryan Howard
they're
is
also
hot.
playing.
I don't know if anybody
they're
else
also
is. Ryan
no,
Howard is hot.
They're doing well, and they have the Braves and the Nationals. Really, are these hard teams for the?
Let
for
me
the
tell
Phillies
you.
to
Let
beat?
me
They're
give
not
you a
even
little
close to the
revisionist
same
history
caliber.
to a year ago. The New York Mets had the Braves and the Nationals and a 3-game series against the dreadful
and do you think the
Marlins.
Phillies are going to make the same mistake that the Mets did?
I don't think so.
I don't think so.
I think it's going to be tough for the Phillies to get excited in the heat of this wild card
When
and in
the
the heat of the NL
Phillies-
East. The
they're gonna
last
have a-
weekend of the season, they're going to be playing the Washington Nationals. I'm not saying the Nationals are a good team. I'm saying it's tough to get up. The Mets are going to be playing
Well,
the
the
Marlins.
Mets are
a
I'll
gonna-
tell
team
you
that
what makes
just
it
won 8
exciting and
straight.
what keeps them up is the fact that they're right now in the lead for their division, and that's what they're fighting for. They're not just like, oh, whatever, we're playing the Nationals. They're playing for a division title.
Well, that's
think
what everybody
that-
said about the Mets last year, and we saw what happened. They collapsed because they
And
didn't
then
have the
now
right
they're
mental
a wild
mindset.
card team this
Well,
year.
look, the Mets against the Cubs have a great shot because the Cubs have already clinched.
They're gonna be setting
so
their rotation.
The Cubs,
I agree
the
with
Cubs
you
will
on that.
set, but the problem is when the Mets go into Florida, if
They don't go into Florida.
or
Florida
when
comes into
Florida
New York
comes into
to
New York.
close
No,
Shea
here's
Stadium.
the
You don't
problem.
think that team's going to get
Oh,
amped
come
to play?
on, give me a
They're going to
break.
be closing
It's
Shea
Shea Stadium.
It's
Give
been
me a
around for
break.
50 years. You know what? We might not get an all-day ESPN coverage, but I guarantee you they'll get up to play in the final games at Shea.
When Florida comes in, if they come out of D.C., Florida has won a makeup at Cincinnati, then they've got 3 in D.C.
They're gonna be in the thick of
if
the playoff
Florida
race. You're
comes
right
in
about that.
comes in with 3 from D.C., Florida is going to be the team that's coming in with something to prove because the Mets are still going to be sitting out in front in the wild card, and that could be the
Well, I
problem.
mean,
when
Milwaukee
Florida
plays the
comes in.
Pirates. I mean, Milwaukee's not
Well,
out of
but
this race
Milwaukee
yet.
is just
They're
not.
a game and a
just-
half back.
They're out.
Here's the other
They're
thing
out.
about the NL East. Night and day, you wake up in the morning, you go to sleep at night, you wake up again. There's a new team leading the NL East. The Phillies are up by a game and a half. We've got 7 games to play. In 2 nights, the Mets could just as well be up. You can't tell me this is a different Mets team than last year, and I really do honestly believe the Phillies have never held the lead in the NL East. They're the fighting Phils. We've seen them come back time and time again. Now they're going to have to play from in front.
Now
I think the
they've
Mets
come
learned
back
from
and they're
last
gonna
year.
stay up.
They
There's no way.
exercised those demons, starting
and
with
we have
Johan
to-
Santana,
and-
and
All
they,
right, Katie,
they get
last
over the
word.
hump.
Katie,
All right,
last word.
we
5
have to
seconds.
get back to the bullpen. The Mets bullpen is terrible. And
Okay,
it's
that's
killed
enough.
them.
That's the point.
You
Okay,
can get rid of that.
we're out of time. We're out of time. The Mets bullpen is terrible, and the Phillies are just all around a better team. I don't think there's anyone in the world that would doubt that.
It's a really easy question when I have 2 Phillies fans.
So I
That's really
think that
great.
Katie's going to win this round.
I tried to avoid the bullpen as long as I could. I stayed away from it as long as I
You can
could.
stay away from that.